Welcome to yet again 3 cold cases that will make you question humanity's existence. The complex mind of a killer and the insanity within their minds that persuades them into doing cruel and sinister acts. From the dispute of 2 brothers, the murderer who thinks he can get away with his crime, and a wife who planned to kill his family by poisoning them. Prepare yourself as we submerge you into the dark world of crimes. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
In many households, brotherly arguments are as common as the rising sun. Siblings clash over trivial matters, their voices echoing through the walls in heated exchanges. From who left the dishes unwashed to whose turn it is to walk the dog, every minor detail becomes a battleground for their stubborn wills. And as their voices grow louder, so does the tension in the air, thick with the weight of unresolved conflicts and simmering resentments. And for the Eckert family, they were no strangers to these disagreements and conflicts. One Florida morning in 2010, 2 brothers went to combat, and only one came out alive. Subsequent to this terrible demise, a rather unsettling deed occurred. One brother buried the other, leaving him undiscovered by his own parents. Be warned, the following contains the disturbing 911 call from the said family's residence.
911, I just have your emergency. Hello?
I need police. My brother killed my brother.
I heard the street name. What you going outside or somewhere so I can hear you?
He killed my brother and he's in the ground. I'm honestly here, please.
I can't make out what you're saying. Slow down. Slow down.
Okay.
Don't yell into the phone. Talk normal and slow down.
My brother, Stanley Elias Eckert.
Your brother
killed. My brother, Stanley Elias Eckert. Killed.
I can't get that.
He killed.
Your 6-year-old brother?
No.
Okay.
He killed my other brother.
When?
And buried him in my mom's backyard.
When?
Please. 3 days ago. Please, because my brother's here and he sees us digging up the body. He's gonna kill us. Oh my God.
How do you know you killed your brother? Wait a minute. How do you know?
He's in the ground. My dad's digging him out now, and he's gonna look into it. Please.
Okay. You need to slow down. Slow down. I need to find out what's going on at this house before I send anybody there.
There's a dead boy in the ground.
Okay. How do you know this? What do you see?
Because I see him. It's my brother.
How do you see him if he's in the ground?
I swear to God, Daddy. It's my brother. My mother's wife, dog. Please.
Body part hanging out of the ground?
The whole body.
Hello?
Okay,
I heard you, but what is all the shouting for?
Because we're upset because my brother killed my brother. Please. Stop for a second. How old are these people you're talking about? Who killed who? I'm really scared because my mom's talking to my brother and I don't want him to kill me.
The police are coming.
Okay.
Now,
wait
a minute. Wait. Don't hang up. Don't hang up yet.
Oh, please.
Did the 19-year-old
is in the ground.
No, you never answered me. How do you know this? Do you see a body part? What do you see?
No, the whole body. My dad is over his body right now, screaming.
I can't understand. I can't understand you.
My dad is laying over the body. We just dug up the dirt because my brother had dug a hole the other night. So I came to my mom today and I said, Mom, we need to dig up that hole. What's in that hole? And she said, let's go.
So your father dug up the dirt and he's laying over the person that's in there? Okay, all right. They're going to be there in a second, okay?
A furious fight broke out between 21-year-old Stanley Elias Eckert and his 19-year-old younger brother, Sean, on June 19, 2010, in Brooksville, Florida. The siblings were having heated arguments about Sean's girlfriend. Stanley freely acknowledged his interest in the girl in question and expressed his jealousy. But this verbal sparring between the 2 brothers quickly descended into a hazardous wrestling battle. Stanley heard a bang as both he and his brother struck the ground, and things became ugly fast. Stanley, who was unharmed physically, recognized right away that the noise he had heard was his brother breaking his neck. Stanley had murdered his younger brother by mistake. Stanley took the heinous choice to bury his brother's body in the backyard rather than seeking help. He subsequently stated that he did this unimaginable thing to keep his mother safe, since he did not want her to face the corpse of her own son. Stanley claimed that the true reason he had hidden Sean's body in such a gruesome way was because of his mother's weak heart, but he did not appear to give any attention to his father, Samuel Eckhard, who would be the one to uncover the horrific burial 3 days later. When Sean Eckhard's disappearance was noticed on Friday night, his family thought he had vanished. They were unaware that he was interred outside their house. When family members inquired about what Stanley was doing in the garden after he was seen burying something, he said that he was burying his ex-girlfriend's clothes because he was tired of staring at them. The family started to suspect that Stanley would have been perfectly content with a basic trash bag in this particular situation. Stanley and Samuel, Sean's father, then excavated the area where his son had been observed purposefully concealing something. When the father saw his 19-year-old son's cold body, he fell to the ground in disbelief. Stanley had texted Sean's girlfriend that they could now be together because Sean would soon be splitting up with her, before Samuel made the tragic discovery. Was Stanley really thinking that he could hide Sean's body and take his girlfriend without anyone noticing? Or had the 21-year-old just lost his mind after carrying out such a terrible deed? Regardless of Stanley's intentions, they were inconsequential. After burying Sean, Stanley avoided the family for the remainder of the weekend. However, when Sean's body was discovered and the third Eckhard sibling frantically dialed 911, law authorities did not have to search far to identify the perpetrator. Following his detention, Stanley Elias Eckhart was accused of first-degree murder. The cause of Sean Eckhart's demise was determined to be a skull fracture. When questioned, Stanley told authorities that Sean's murder was an accident and that he had never really intended to kill his own brother. This was hard for police enforcement to believe because of Stanley's text to Sean's girlfriend and the fact that he buried his brother after the deed. Subsequently, investigators learned that Sean Eckhart had been in a coma for almost a year before the accident and that he had a brain disorder. He was underweight and had a seriously weakened immune system as a result. It was later determined that Sean Eckhart would have survived his fall if he had not been injured in the altercation with his older brother Stanley. The jury reduced Stanley's indictment to second-degree murder as a result of this, and Stanley's admission that he did not intend to kill Sean. Stanley Eckhart was given a 50-year prison term after rejecting a plea agreement that would have limited it to a maximum of 20 years. This was true even if the parents of Sean and Stanley begged for compassion in terms of punishment. When Donna learned that her oldest son would be incarcerated for the next 50 years, she became quite upset. She clarified that the case included a tragic family accident rather than a homicide. When friends and relatives were asked about the boys' relationship, several of them mentioned that although the fights and disputes were frequent, they were usually lighthearted and never got out of hand. Stanley and Sean's friend Tyler Fiochetta expressed his opinion that the 21-year-old's behavior was unusual for him. All the times I hung out with him, I never saw one violent tendency towards him. I hung out with his brother too, and I saw his brother a week and a half, 2 weeks prior to this happening, Tyler Fiochetta said. Although people who knew the brothers well remembered them in quite different ways, those who weren't close to them shared favorable aspects of their character and demeanor. Another neighbor, Nicole Quarto, said, "It was the rowdy house of the neighborhood, you know. They always have the cops there, they always have loudness, fighting, those kinds of things." She stated that except for the Eckhart house, the neighborhood is regarded as a reasonably calm and serene place. Stanley was the first person to drop out of high school, and Sean was the second. Though it's probable that Sean's battles with illness were the reason he decided to drop out of high school early. It was well known that Stanley loved martial arts and collecting swords and other weapons. A former acquaintance recalled playing video games with the Eckhart brothers, but he also admitted to having stopped hanging out with Stanley once the oldest brother began engaging in what was loosely defined as bad stuff. During Stanley's trial, Samantha Rowe, the girl the two Eckhart lads had been fighting over, took the evidence and described an exchange she had with the accused following Sean's passing. "He told me that he was a lot more relaxed now that Sean had left, and there wasn't so much tension in the house anymore," Samantha Rowe said. When the family discovered Sean's body, they called the 911 operator from the Eckhart residence. The dispatcher's actions drew harsh criticism. Her frequent requests for the youngest Eckhart sibling to reiterate the incident's specifics were aimed at, as was her failure to help the Eckharts in a timely and professional manner. Following the incident, the emergency dispatcher was reportedly penalized, and it seems that the issue was resolved internally. Stanley's excessive envy was the driving force for the struggle that ended in Sean Eckhart's death on June 19, 2010. But what really makes this crime so unsettling, and the main reason Stanley Eckhart will now spend the most of his life behind bars, are Stanley's subsequent acts. Stanley apologized to his family during his trial, saying, "I made bad decisions and I just kept making them. Though I wish I could take it back, I'm unable to do so. Thus, it is irrelevant. I apologize." Stanley took away his family's life, but his parents still stand by him and are probably now trying to mend whatever harm they can to the Eckhart family. The truth is that Donna and Samuel Eckhart lost one son to death and another to prison. Some people would argue that families are never without conflict, but few could ever fathom the kind of relationship that exists between them. Despite being born in St. Louis, Missouri, Allie Kostiel had always desired to attend the University of Mississippi. She thought her life couldn't have gotten much better when she was finally granted this chance, but then things changed. According to investigators, Allie's life was brutally cut short on that warm July afternoon, and there were no signs or pieces of evidence that could have alerted her companions. When detectives got to the crime site, they were baffled as to how someone could have hurt such a well-mannered, laid-back kid. However, at that point, they narrowed in on their main suspect, a different student with a covert plan that nobody could have predicted. This is the terrible story of Allie Kostiel. Come and join us as we unravel this horrific crime. In 2019, Allie Kostiel, a student at Mississippi State University in Oxford, Mississippi, was 21 years old. The town of Oxford, Mississippi is quite small. Nothing much is happening there. Other than a few eateries and outdoor retailers like Tractor Supply, the town didn't have much to offer. With barely 25,000 residents, it's a charming little town that's quite calm and ideal for college students to live in because there isn't much difficulty to be had in such a small, laid-back community. The town's greatest attraction is the University of Mississippi, and it's safe to infer that the college also provides the majority of the town's revenue. The university has an acceptance rate of around 90%, but the reason most people go here is likely because its tuition is relatively low compared to other similar schools. And with a graduation rate of about 65%, it fits right in line with schools that may cost 10 times as much, while offering what is essentially the exact same education. This is likely why Allie Kostiel was so determined to attend the University of Mississippi. A great school, a great price, and usually great people. Allie was going to college with the intention of earning a marketing degree. Because she had been attending summer school in addition to her regular college courses, she was expected to graduate in the spring of 2020, which was significantly earlier than many of her friends and peers. Allie had aspirations of working in the fashion sector, although she never explicitly said in public what kind of fashion marketing position she was aiming for. Allie, however, was more than just an average student at the University of Mississippi. There are very few people who can ever equal her intense passion. In addition to being the president of the school's golf club, Allie had assisted in founding the sorority Alpha Phi. If all of this wasn't enough, she would also assist in instructing exercise courses in the neighborhood during her leisure time. Though it's obvious that Allie was extremely busy and seldom found time for her friends and family, those close to her wonder how she managed to fit everything in. In addition, summer school was added to the list of things Allie had to complete. Recalling Allie's aspirations of going to college, her mother noted that in addition to envisioning herself forging a successful profession, Allie dreamed of finding her future spouse there. By the time she graduated, Allie was sure she would be able to find a compatible companion and settle down with a trustworthy man. When Allie stumbled upon student Brandon Thiesfeld in the fall of 2016, she thought she had finally met this man. Sadly, though, her sentiments weren't reciprocated. Although Allie's friends tried their best to warn her about Brandon, they claimed that his presence blinded Allie. Allie was pulled to him with a magnetic intensity for some reason, and she couldn't get him out of her head. Allie couldn't let him go, even though these feelings were regrettably far from reciprocal. Allie would discover a great deal about herself during the ensuing years, after realizing the lengths she would go to in order to keep Brandon in her life. Strangely enough, Allie and Brandon Thiesfeld didn't really cross paths on campus. Although she first met him in Fort Worth, Texas in 2016, she soon discovered he was a University of Mississippi student. This probably gave Allie the impression that their love was meant to be and that the stars were finally aligning. Sadly, though, this wasn't the case. Now, Allie most definitely was unaware of this at the time. However, everyone in her immediate vicinity was aware of Brandon's true nature. Brandon was one of the crowd members. At least among other males his age, he was well liked right away. In terms of women, however, once they found out about him, they would frequently turn away. However, Allie was an exception to that rule. She was unable to obtain enough. Numerous friends and acquaintances claimed that Brandon was, to put it mildly, an awful person. He was the epitome of what a piece of human waste could be. Allie's pals all remember him as a complete tool. He would never discuss anything but his father's wealth and how he could do anything he wanted since his father would always come to his rescue. Whether what Brandon was doing was morally wrong or unlawful, it didn't matter. He would always do what he wanted, no matter who he wounded along the way. Speaking about Brandon, one of Allie's pals called him a pig, even though she desired to be anonymous. She added that he would have 6 different girlfriends with him at once, sit back and laugh at them, and use his family's money to do whatever he pleased. She concluded her criticism of Brandon by calling him extremely misogynistic. Similar memories of Brandon were shared by other friends. They claimed he had no respect for women at all, and had grown up as a daddy's boy. For him, they were just objects to be played with. In the dorms, he would persistently harass any female that he encountered, according to one friend. After spending time with them and getting what he wanted from them, he would move on to the next one. Regretfully, it appears that Allie was also impacted by this. Allie was utterly enamored with Brandon. Allie believed that they had begun dating and that the two were exclusive in the beginning of their relationship. Allie's family, however, believes that she could not have been more mistaken. One day, when Allie had returned from college, her mother recalled, Allie had announced that she had met a boy, more precisely a lad from Texas. According to her mother, Allie has always had a fascination with Texas and Texans for whatever reason. She was therefore overjoyed to meet a boy who was from one of her favorite locations. At first, Allie thought of Brandon as just her crush, but it soon became apparent that they were much more than that. One of Allie's best friends, Maddie Norris, claims that she has never ever laid eyes on Brandon. Maddie claims that Brandon never seemed to have enough time to spend with Allie's friends and family. Allie could not stop thinking about Brandon, even though Maddie would later characterize their connection as on and off again. According to Allie's pals, Brandon repeatedly crushed her. She would continuously schedule things with him, but he would never arrive. She would ask her friends to meet him, but a few hours before the get-together, he would vanish. She would arrange phone conversations or dates, but he would never show up. In the summer of 2019, it all came to a head. Allie and Brandon had been somewhat involved with each other for roughly 3 years by this time. However, Allie then gave Brandon a shocking revelation. She might be pregnant, she told him in a text message. In addition, she included a picture of a pregnancy test that was deemed inconclusive. Allie was a senior in college at the time and intended to graduate the following spring in a matter of months. On June 14th at about 10:15 p.m., she told Brandon that she might be pregnant. Normally, when Allie stretched out to him, Brandon would try his hardest to duck and hide, but this time was different. Almost instantly, he replied, telling her to just take the Plan B medication and get on with her life. "I do not want a kid at all," he said, adding that he had no ambitions to raise a family. 2 minutes later, this was followed by another text that said, "No kid at all, I'm serious. It's gonna wreck my life." Allie immediately scheduled a meeting with Brandon to discuss the alleged pregnancy, but guess what? He never showed up. She also set up several follow-up appointments, but he failed to appear at all of them. Every time he would make up an explanation saying he was busy, had other commitments, or had just forgotten. Brandon wouldn't actually get around to meeting Allie until July of that same year, but he had more in mind than just seeing her. He had a much darker secret and much grander aspirations. Once more, Allie and Brandon had agreed to get together on July 19th, 2019 evening. Allie was supposed to be 3 months pregnant at this point, but strangely, the police discovered security tape from that evening, indicating she had been at a pub. She was driven home by herself after leaving the bar in an Uber, indicating that she had probably consumed alcohol. This occurred at 11:52 p.m. Believe it or not, Brandon really showed up for their scheduled appointment a few hours later at 1:28 a.m. After picking Allie up, they took a car down to Sardis Lake to a fishing camp. The two had been driving to the fishing camp while consuming junk food and White Claws, based on pictures collected at the scene of the crime. To be clear, this was happening while the two were acting under the false impression that Allie was pregnant. Additionally, White Claws are alcoholics, and junk food isn't good for babies. When the two got to the fishing camp at 2:15 a.m., people who lived nearby reported hearing many gunshots fired in the night. The bullets were heard by a woman walking her dog between 2:15 and 2:30 in the morning, which is almost exactly when Allie and Brandon would have arrived. A crime scene was discovered by a police officer who was passing through the area at 10:30 a.m. that same morning while on one of his regular patrols around the camp. He saw Allie lying face down on the ground when he arrived at the camp, according to the police officer's testimony and the photos taken at the murder scene. He discovered her pocketbook, 2 cans of White Claw, and the previously mentioned snack bag in close proximity. A jacket lay on an adjacent picnic table as well. Allie had been wounded by many rounds at a fairly close range, and it was evident when he got up close that she had died. After a closer look, the officer reported that Allie had been hit 9 times in total, even though 2 bullets were missing and 11 shell casings had been discovered nearby. The investigator claimed that he had never seen someone beat that frequently in all of his years in the military. After Allie's identification was established, the police started right to work on the investigation, speaking with her closest friends and relatives. They were especially intrigued by Allie's friends' testimonies. Detectives soon discovered that one name kept coming up in conversations after talking to a number of friends and acquaintances: Brandon Thiesfeld. Although Brandon was hard to find, the police were eventually able to contact him and asked him to come in for questioning. They only stated that they were interested in hearing his testimony from the night of the crime, as far as I can tell, not that he was a suspect. However, Brandon showed the same flagrant disregard for the police as he did for all the women in his life. At least 3 times he promised the cops he would meet them at a certain place and time, but he never did. After he lied a 3rd time, the police became considerably more concerned. They met with the judge, asked for a warrant for his arrest, and asked to see his cell phone data. The judge accepted this request, and Brandon's cell phone was used by the police to track his whereabouts. He was no longer even in the state of Mississippi, as they soon discovered. He had left without telling them, having packed his luggage and was traveling to Tennessee. This was obviously not going to work, and after he was issued a bolo for his truck, a $80,000 Ford F-150 that he had once again bought with his father's money, police were able to locate him. Brandon was taken into custody in Memphis just 2 hours after sending out the bolo. Things took a drastic turn for Brandon when the police searched his truck. He had been hiding a .40 caliber gun, which they discovered to be the same weapon that was used at the crime site. Even though Brandon was deported back to Mississippi right after, things will only get worse from here on out. Police asked for access to Allie's phone records while they were attempting to connect Brandon to the crime scene. Although they had undoubtedly located the weapon used in the killing, they had no apparent motive, which made it more difficult for a jury to find Brandon guilty. It wouldn't take them long to find a ton of evidence that was too strong to ignore. They were able to use Allie's location data, fitness data, and text messages when they started going through her Apple Watch and iPhone. This allowed them to create a very clear picture of when the incident occurred, how it unfolded, and what part Brandon had played in it. Through Apple iMessage, they were able to verify that Brandon was the last person to have seen Allie on the night she vanished. Furthermore, they were able to correlate their location data with the very same place at the precise same time. But the worst proof of all arrived next. They discovered via reading Allie's text conversations that she had been tricking Brandon into thinking she was pregnant and that the child belonged to him for 3 months. Naturally scared, Brandon refused to do the right thing and simply get together with Allie to discuss the situation and determine what part she wanted him to play in it all. It was quite obvious that Brandon didn't want kids. Allie persisted in pressuring him to discuss the options, though. Ultimately, Brandon took a snap decision that would permanently alter the course of his community's history. Authorities were able to demonstrate that Brandon chose to take Allie's life and the life of her unborn child out of fear that she would, quote, ruin his life. Or did he? Yes, he did indeed claim Allie's life. But during an autopsy on Allie's body, a startling discovery was made public. There was no proof that Allie was pregnant or had been in the recent past. What was the matter with the peculiar pregnancy test she presented to Brandon? Who knows, really? It appears like Allie was taking the pregnancy test as long as she could in the hopes of meeting Brandon, even though there are a million reasons why the results could be inconclusive. The problem is that we have no way of knowing if Allie was aware that she wasn't pregnant. If she was truly just playing him, there's no way for us to find out. What truly surprises me, though, is that she never bothered to take a follow-up pregnancy test to establish whether or not she was pregnant during the 3 months she thought she might be. However, in my opinion, her presence at the pub that evening and the discovery of White Claws at the crime site are the most important pieces of evidence demonstrating her knowledge that she was not pregnant. It was a bright girl, Allie. She most likely understood that she shouldn't be drinking if she was expecting. This seems to imply, in my opinion, that Allie was so utterly devoted to Brandon that she would have done almost anything to have a few minutes alone with him and work things out, but that Brandon was simply too much of a coward to take responsibility for his actions and just sit down and talk with her. The thing that worries me the most is that Brandon could have also pieced all of this together if he had half a brain. Rather than pursuing their connection, he made the decision to terminate his life. Allie had been putting in a lot of effort to earn her degree so she could start her ideal job. She had made a great effort to fall in love and start a life with someone, but sadly that someone was unable to love her in return. Allie had everything going for her, but this insane creature took everything away from her. Police discovered a handwritten note in which Brandon took ownership of his acts after he was arrested. In the note, which was addressed to his parents, he expressed his regret for his actions and the suffering they had endured. He clarified that in the years preceding the incident, he had been experiencing troubling ideas. He claimed he had no idea where these thoughts had originated from, but that he had ultimately followed through on them, and that he sincerely regretted doing so. In the end, Brandon received a life sentence with the chance of release upon reaching the age of 65. It appears that Brandon had finally committed a felony for which his father was unable to provide a bail. In the quiet suburbia, a wife shouldered her roles dutifully, cooking, cleaning, and the silent support for her husband. But beneath her facade of domestic bliss, she harbored a torrid affair, a forbidden liaison blossoming across oceans. As the affair unfurled, guilt gnawed at her conscience, driving her to drastic measures. With trembling hands, she laced his drink with a lethal dose of poison, a final act of desperation to silence the guilt and keep her secrets buried forever. This Missourian lady is charged with poisoning her spouse with the poisonous lily of the valley plant, which can lead to cardiac issues. She had an affair with a man who resided halfway across the world, which is the reason for this. You might assume that an ENT design teacher at a private Christian school wouldn't act in this manner, but allow me to introduce you to Sarah Sheffer, a 37-year-old Missourian who works at Calvary Lutheran High School. Her life appears to be centered around optimism and creativity, but that wasn't the case before an unforeseen circumstance happened. In 2022, Sarah used her 20 years of experience in the arts to land a job in the same city as the executive director of a nonprofit art gallery. A YouTube video of her displaying the inside of an art gallery shows how intimately engaged to the world of aesthetics and expression she was.
I'd like to bring art into the community more with a community.
Sarah would be a wonderful wife and mother if we can pull off this program's successful launch, which would match artists with nearby companies to give them opportunity for displays and increase their sales and exposure. At the start of 2024, on the other hand, the exact opposite occurred. Her husband, Matthew Sheffer, was obviously terrified as he went into the police station and related his terrifying tale. Matthew was certain that his own wife was deliberately poisoning him, which was why he was concerned. This was not your average dramatic TV show or film rehearsal. He said that for 6 weeks he had been in mute anguish because his wife had been surreptitiously putting poison to his food. When Matthew started having severe symptoms after eating or drinking something that his wife had served him, he started to get suspicious. Among these were dizziness, nausea, excessive exhaustion, and blurred vision. When Matthew took a sip of the seemingly innocuous drink Sarah had given him on December 31, 2023, he complained that it didn't taste right. When he questioned Sarah about it, she casually admitted to adding her own urine and a potent adhesive to the drink. This was concerning enough for him to look further into what was going on. This shocking discovery so shocked Matthew that he made the decision to act independently. He put a clandestine CCTV camera in their kitchen because he wanted proof. In the video, Sarah is seen putting strange things in the blender to make smoothies for her spouse. The lily-of-the-valley root was surprisingly one of the ingredients. Cardiac glycoside-containing plants are particularly dangerous since they slow down the heart, which is definitely not something you want. After some study, I found that many people are unaware of the plant's high toxicity. Despite its harmless appearance and gorgeous white bells that seem to make it a good home for Tinkerbell, this plant is actually one of the most dangerous species known to science. It may be found in North America, Europe, and Asia. In the Northern Hemisphere, it is commonly linked to happiness, being the birth flower for May. All parts of the plant, including the bulbs, stems, leaves, flowers, and berries, contain 38 different chemicals that upset the heart. Consuming it could result in decreased heartbeat, nausea, vomiting, skin rashes, and blurred vision. Who would have thought something so beautiful could be so dangerous? Before even glancing at the secretly captured CCTV tape, Matthew returned to the location and noticed something noteworthy. He stated that he had observed a bag marked Lily of the Valley propped up on a table at Sheffer's home office. Matthew guessed that the green dish next to the bag held a root. Swiftly moving, Matthew snapped a photo of this crucial document, and with the help of the secretly captured CCTV film, he now had concrete evidence. Sarah was arrested that same day when he quickly called the police to report the incident. It was said that during Sheffer's police interrogation, he admitted to deliberately putting the lily-of-the-valley root into the mixer with the goal of injuring the victim. Law enforcement claims that Sarah knew full well that this plant might have played a role in her husband's demise. When the accused provided Matthew food or drink, Matthew was questioned 8 times. Each time, the food or drink had a strange, uncomfortable flavor that coincided with the preparation of the possibly hazardous smoothie. With a nonchalant air, she stowed it away in the refrigerator. Even more alarming is the fact that rather than hiding or locking it away and setting it out to dry or in another drink, she didn't seem to consider the prospect that her 2 children would find it and take a taste. The worst part is that she poisoned her husband for an entirely irrational reason. Sarah's dangerous act was motivated by her romantic relationship with a man in Pakistan. Information she found while conducting recent online searches before attempting to poison her spouse supports this startling discovery. She's been looking non-stop for flights to Pakistan. Thankfully, Matthew's sickness was easily treated, and he lived to tell about it. Although it's a relief that things did not end tragically, this is not the first time something of this nature has occurred. Another incident involving a man who passed away in Utah a year prior involved his wife apparently adding fennel to his drink. Amazingly, she even went on to write a children's book about loss after that. According to court documents, the husband expressed suspicions that his wife had attempted to poison him on multiple occasions and made it plain that she would bear the consequences of anything bad. Unbelievably, 6 months ago, the same thing occurred again. When her husband, a U.S. Air Force member, began to suspect foul play when they were stationed in Germany, Arizonan Melody Felico Johnson found herself in a similar scenario to Sarah. It is said that over several months, Melody attempted to taint her husband's morning coffee with bleach. Nevertheless, her spouse was unaware of the peculiar flavor for several months. After conducting some research with pool chemical strips, he discovered that his cup contained an excessive amount of chlorine. That's when he decided to take unilateral action, installing a hidden camera to capture Melody. In 2018, Lana Clayton discovered her husband, Steve Clayton, dead at the bottom of their South Carolina home stairs, which was another unsettling episode. The coroner's office first believed that Steve's death could have been the result of a heart attack, but Steve's nephew, Nick French, a fellow police officer, saw that Lana had not attempted to revive him and that Steve's phone was missing. Following an autopsy and toxicological examination, tetrahydrozoline, a peculiar chemical, was discovered in Steve Clayton. It was alleged that Lana Clayton poisoned her husband with eye drops, causing his premature demise. It's uncomfortable to think that these disturbing reasons have been coming up, bringing attention to the darker side of relationships and the unexpected risk that can be present behind closed doors. Even if Sarah Sheffer's circumstance is not very unique, it's important to understand that this kind of behavior is abnormal and should not be tolerated. Given the agony Sarah caused her husband, even if it's clear from her actions that she may not be in the best of moods right now, It's hard to see Sarah getting any type of mercy. The school deleted her name and picture from its website after learning of her arrest, indicating that she is no longer employed there. Police reportedly tipped off Calvary Lutheran High School about a criminal case involving a staff member who had been placed on leave, according to ABC News. Head of Calvary Lutheran School John Chrisman made it clear in a statement that the school takes care of everyone associated with its programs, and that as such they handled the situation delicately and with compassion, as any decent Christian community would. The most important thing to remember from this is that neither the school nor any other employee were involved in any of the events. Meanwhile, Sheffer had her turn in court, adamantly stating that she intends to have her own legal counsel and that she is innocent. Because of her suspected poisoning episode, prosecutors think Sheffer poses a risk to public safety and are working to revoke her bail. Her relationship with a man in Pakistan is also seen by them as a possible means of escape. Sheffer is now being detained at the Cole County Jail. Sheffer's future is currently in doubt while decisions are made by the legal system, and the court has the power to decide how her case will be handled going forward. The outcome of this case will have an impact on Sheffer's life, as well as provoke thought on the difficulties involved in justice, responsibility, and finding the truth.
Hey, thanks for sticking with us today. Check out this other thrilling videos for you to watch, and while you're at it, hit that subscribe and like button, and let us know down below your thoughts on today's case. Until then, take care.